Boob Wasteland Show with your host, Jerry Sadavia. So today I'm going to take a crack at deciphering some of the clues from the show Resurrection. I'm reviewing the first 2 seasons of the show, what I think the show is about, whether or not this is going to lead to season 3. I would hope so. This is an intrinsically fascinating show. It's very complex, a lot of characters that weave in and out of the narrative, and I'm going to do the best I can to kind of pare it down to the essentials. So that's kind of tough to do for one show, but I'm going to give it a shot. So, Resurrection. This is a show based on a novel called The Returned, which was written by Jason Mott. And this is one of those unusual circumstances where before the novel was published, ABC already had bought the rights to the book, so that's rather interesting. Yeah. So what is Resurrection about? The show starts with a young boy named Jacob who's found in China. And he is an 8-year-old boy who apparently had drowned in 1982 but is found in present day, let's say 2014, I imagine. He was a resident of the town of Arcadia in Missouri. And Omar Epps plays J.J. Marty Bellamy, who is the immigration agent who brings Jacob back to the United States. And he doesn't follow orders, but he decides to return Jacob to his parents, who are of course perplexed by the appearance of this kid who they hadn't seen in 30 years, obviously, because they thought he was dead. And they are Henry, played by Kurtwood Smith, who's always a pleasure to watch on screen, and Lucille, played by Frances Fisher, always a pleasure to watch her. And so, he is a returned. That's what Jacob is. Why he was found in China is a good question. Other people start returning to the town of Arcadia, people who had passed on in the town of Arcadia, and they're coming back to life, and we don't know why, and the show never actually reveals the reason for this. Caleb Richards is the father of Maggie's best friend, who is Dr. Maggie Langston, played by Devin Kelly. And let me backtrack here. Okay, Dr. Maggie Langston, clearly a doctor, is Fred's daughter, Fred Langston, played by Matt Craven, who is the sheriff of Arcadia, who is the brother of Henry, played by Kurtwood Smith. Okay, so her best friend, Maggie's, is Elaine Richards, played by Samir Armstrong. And her father returns, Caleb Richards, who turns out to be, let's say, has a murderous bent to him, let's put it that way. So he's the second return. He says that, ominously, that more people are going to return, and they do. Quite a few people, in fact. One of the more interesting ones is Pastor Tom. He's the pastor of Arcadia, and his wife returns as well. And she was pregnant at the time and died by the river. Now, apparently, Jacob drowned in the same river in Arcadia, where later in the show they find a bunch of dead bodies there. And then there's something about skulls being found in a factory that was owned by the Langstons, so going back several generations. And another one that returns is Margaret Langston, played by Michelle Fairley, who is, by the way, she is a fantastic actress. She doesn't even have to do much. She sells the role. This woman could give you nightmares. I mean, you don't want to be near her. She is really an amazing actress. Anyway, this character comes back, Margaret Langston being Henry Langston and Fred Langston's mother. And anyway, there is a mystery about Margaret, who digs up several skulls in the family's abandoned factory. Why the human remains are found there, what went on in that factory, is up for some speculation. But let's just say that we see a flashback of Margaret witnessing a hanging, for one, and crying and when she's about to get married in an arranged marriage and that sort of thing. So she has a lot of backstory. One of the more interesting characters. I mean, all of them are really. Then there's the pastor's wife, Rachel Breadwood. Okay, she's played by Kathleen Monroe, who also is a very startling actress. Kind of, she seems so innocent, and she's in a town where they just want to kind of do away with her, because there's also a group of people who are trying to do away with the returned. They don't want these people here. It's driving the town upside down and over and just creating a lot of chaos, and they don't want it. Anyway, she's the one who's pregnant, but the pastor is already married to somebody else, and that would be Janine Hale, played by Lori Beth Sykes, who is not very keen on Rachel, to say the least, and Rachel ends up living with them. At first, the pastor tries to hide this particular return from his wife, but he can't, and the church is, they almost want to go up in arms over this particular, relationship that had existed, and how can he be with two women, etc., etc. So, what is going on? I mean, there's probably so much more I could say in terms of the characters, but what is really going on in Resurrection? It's hard to say for sure. It seems like it's the kind of show which I appreciate, that brings back elements of the past and how they reflect on the present, and that's what the returned kind of symbolize. Why, for example, Caleb Richards, again, the one with the murderous rage, why he kind of vanishes when he's sent to prison because there's a botched bank robbery. He vanishes, and Barbara Langdon also vanishes, but she's made to vanish by Margaret Langdon, who's not keen on her return. That's an interesting question to ask. There's also another character who appears in the film that would be... Now, Pastor James believes that Rachel's unborn baby is the Antichrist. So there's that element as well that adds a little more. He's also returned, and he has a tattoo on his back of the tree. You could call it the Tree of Life. Now, Omar Epps' character has also a tattoo, which is a half-moon shape. So, seems that it's got something to do with that Tree of Life that's in a particular area in Arcadia. And then there's all the cicadas that come out, which ended the first season. And now, in the end of the second season, if you haven't seen it, please turn this off immediately. The newborn baby is in the house, and the camera pans away to a window, and all the cicadas appear. So, what does the cicadas have to do with anything? It's like the locusts, is it because this child carries some special significance? I don't know. But certain characters vanish in and out. Interesting about Janine, at one point, seems like she's healing Rachel's baby. She seems very welcoming. Like, at first she's hesitant, and she seems very welcoming, and then of Rachel, and then it turns out she really isn't. There's so much going on in this show, I can't really say for sure, but it kept my interest. I mean, this show really, through 2 seasons, really kept my interest, especially this new character, Pastor James, who at one point asks Fred the sheriff to shoot him in order to save Henry, who dies and then comes back. But it seems that Pastor James has got other ideas when he thinks Rachel's baby, is the Antichrist, and he wants to make Rachel disappear. And Tom, unfortunately, goes to the afterlife, by the way, because he is during a riot where this group that wants to do away with the return went to burn down the church where some of them are being held and so on, and he is hit by a cop car, so he dies. That's rather unfortunate. It was one death that really upset me, was seeing that pastor die. But yeah, I don't, again, Not entirely sure what's happening in this show. At the end of the second season, interestingly enough, when things seem to settle down a little bit, and there's a news program they're watching which suggests that there are returns coming back from all over the world. But why Jacob showed up in China, I don't understand that one. That confuses me. So I don't know. But I would imagine that if season 3 happens, and the film ends with a coda that's set a year later, perhaps it's going to focus on that child, Rachel's baby. Also interesting how some people who die do come back returned and others do not. And why did the pastor James have to go through such lengths to bring back Henry when everyone expects Henry's just going to return anyway? I don't really know. I can't say for sure, but it's a fascinating show. It just kept my interest. I just hope it comes back for another season. But at least it wasn't, canceled in between seasons. That's what I hate. It was a show that came out a few years ago called Happy Town, which lasted barely 6 episodes. And that story was so fascinating. Sam Neill was in that. And it was again about a town, which I really like. A small town, all of the particular eccentric characters, and you start to get into it and then it's canceled just like that. So hopefully this show will continue. But it's incredibly well written, I think. I like that Omar Epps' Marty ends up with Devin Kelly, or excuse me, Dr. Maggie Langston. And it seems like there's a romantic relationship that's just waiting to happen, really, at any given moment. It's nice to see, if I may, an interracial relationship, because we don't see it often enough on television. There are just so many good things about this show. I was upset by, again, Pastor Tom's character dying, and also the disappearance, of course, of Barbara Langston. But maybe those characters can come back in some way. I mean, everybody's returning anyway, so it's possible. So let's hope so. ABC, please bring back Resurrection. I could go on about this show, but I'm just paring it down to the essentials. And this is the Boob Wasteland Show with your host, Jerry Sadavia, signing off.